Okay, so how does World War I come to an end? Well, this is going to be pretty quick, this last part here, and it basically, no surprise, is the United States getting involved. So why did the U.S. get involved in World War I, and then how did this help end the war? And we're just going to kind of wrap up the war itself. Then we are going to do more information you'll need to know about the impacts of World War I, but those will be separate lectures about the after effect of the war, Treaty of Versailles, all these things you might be familiar with, but those are going to be different lectures. So for now, we're still just at the war itself. So why does the U.S. get involved in World War I? Well, they wanted England to win, but that wasn't enough to get them the war. The U.S. was more isolationistic at the time. In fact, the President of the United States at the time, Woodrow Wilson, ran on the entire campaign. He kept us out of war, and that was the mood of the United States. Let's not get involved there. But there are a couple things that are going to help trigger the U.S. getting into the war. One is a very famous story you may have heard of before in 1915 about the Lusitania. Lusitania, of course, was a British passenger ship that was sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the Germans had U-boats, submarines, and they were sinking passenger ships. Why would they sink passenger ships? Well, these passenger ships were also carrying supplies, weapons, whatever, for the war effort. And everybody knew this. And the Germans even warned, you sail across the Atlantic Ocean, you might be sunk. Well, the ship was sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. It was going from, I believe, New York to England, and it had 1,900 passengers on it, and a U-boat sunk it. There were Americans on this passenger ship as well. So there were 1,200 people killed, including 100 Americans were killed, about 100 Americans were killed, and this obviously upset the United States quite a bit. At which point the U.S. goes to Germany and says, hey, stop sinking the passenger ships. This was 1915. And Germany did back off a little bit. Why? Because they don't want the U.S. in the war. But that still was a wound that the U.S. would not forget. And, the sinking of the Lusitania was a very infamous event. People knew about it. It was spread all over. And this was one thing that really heightened the tension in the U.S. against Germany. But it was still not enough to get the U.S. in the war. We jump ahead into about 1917, and in 1917, there's more, again, passenger ships being sunk. But the other thing that happened in 1917 is a very famous story of a man named Arthur Zimmerman. So Arthur Zimmerman was a German foreign minister. In 1917, he sends what is known as the Zimmermann telegram. And the Zimmermann telegram was a secret telegram that was meant to go from Germany to Mexico. Well, the British intercepted this telegram. Now, what does this telegram say? Very simple. It says, Dear Mexico, if you get involved in a war against the United States now, keep them busy, then they can't come into the war in Europe. And then when we're finished and we have victory in Europe, Germany says, we'll help you, Mexico, fight against the United States to regain land you lost in that Mexican-American War, primarily, back mid-1800s, right? If you remember that from some U.S. history. So anyways, this telegram's intercepted, the British show everybody, and now, the Germans are trying to attack the United States through Mexico. Now, the reality is Mexico probably never would have gone along with this. This probably never would have happened. The telegram is real. People have asked me, is it a real telegram? Was it a conspiracy? No, the telegram was real. It was sent. It was intercepted. But also the reality is probably Mexico wouldn't have jumped along to go on this war. It didn't matter. The perception was, and sometimes perception is more important than reality, is that Germany was using, Mexico to attack the United States, and this really helped trigger people in the United States to get into the war. Plus, again, they want England to win this thing. So, long story short, the Zimmermann telegram was, I believe, February 1917, and by April of 1917, the U.S. is in the war. Once the U.S. is in the war, the tide of the war changes pretty dramatically. It makes sense, right? The U.S. is a massive country with massive resources. We've also industrialized by now. And we get to the point by in 1917, early 1918, we're putting in about 300,000 fresh soldiers into this war every month. Soldiers, weapons, ammunition, supplies, whatever you need. And remember, Germany has been fighting this war since 1914. They're worn out. The Ottoman Empire is worn out. Austria-Hungary is worn out. The British and French are a bit worn out too, but now they have the aid of the United States. It was so bad in Germany, in fact, by the time we get to about 1917, 1918, that the Germans had to institute something called the Auxiliary Service Law, which stated that every German male between the ages of 17 and 60 had to have some job related to the war. So either had to be a soldier or be making ammunition or whatever. That's how bad it was because they had so few men left at that point. So you can imagine with this combination of the Germans losing so many men and the Americans being able to put so many people in at once that the tide of the war changed fairly quickly. This is going to be very different than World War II. Those of you familiar with World War II, we get into World War II and there's still years of conflict. With World War I, once the US gets in, the tide changes very quickly. In 1918, the Germans realized this. They try one big last offensive called the Ludendorff Offensive to try to break the Western Front before too many US forces get in there. They try and they fail. And once the Ludendorff Offensive fails, that's pretty much checkmate. And at that point, the Germans are going to have to surrender. The official end of World War I, well, very famous actually. The official end of World War I, 11/11/11. What is that? The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. I would hope you recognize that date. Anybody? Oh, I'm still like in a classroom. The 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month, 1918. That's, of course, Veterans Day, right? And we still celebrate it. Initially it was Armistice Day, then it becomes Veterans Day. So that's how the war ends. Now, there's still much more during the war, so I am going to send you another just separate YouTube video link on a video that I've always used in class anyways. It's called Total War. Total War is this idea of how everybody was involved in World War I, women, children, the Armenian genocide. You'll take notes on that. And so you'll get some more information on the war itself. And then after we go through the lecture, the videos that I just posted, and you see the YouTube video on the total war, then there'll be subsequent lectures on the aftermath of the war, what happens right after. Alrighty, hope that's clear for everybody. Thank you.
2, 1, go.
Okay. All right, guys, so what we're going to do this time is something a little bit different. I'm going to do a YouTube video instead of... Oh, just keep going, Matt. No, keep going.
3,
No.
2, 1.
Wait. Okay, go.
Do anything.
You have to add. All right, guys, so we're going to try something a little different for this lecture. We're going to do a YouTube video this time. I get started.
3, 2,
Wait.
1.